And when I finally called Anita's mother, Jen, she was crying, and I knew. And unfortunately, in our world, we know at Fire and EMS, we know that voice. We know, and I just said, Anita's dead, isn't she?
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's part one of a two-part show where we chronicle the tragic murder of a first responder's daughter and discuss Native American Ojibwe funeral traditions. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 376. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. For our regular listeners and viewers, you know that I took a break from podcasting for a few months. I hit the podcasting scene pretty hard, putting out a new episode every Tuesday for more than 7 years without fail. It is now my ambition to podcast a little less frequently than I have in the past. But unless you've been a faithful viewer and listener for the past 7 years, you've got plenty of old episodes to go back and listen and watch to keep you busy. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gasway Virtual Training. There are 33 online training programs there for you to choose from. Some of the programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit the samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment, part one of a two-part show where I discuss the tragic murder of a first responder's daughter and discuss Native American Ojibwe funeral culture. My two guests today are Monte Fronk and Fire Chief John Cunningham. Monte Fronk is a 32-year tribal public safety responder who works for the Mille Band of Ojibwe. Monte oversees tribal emergency management and community risk reduction. Among his many credentials, Monte is a certified tribal emergency manager, a tribal EMT, firefighter 1 and 2. He has hazmat ops, fire instructor, fire officer, public educator, member of the Central Minnesota EMS Critical Incident Management Team, and Monte attended the National Fire Academy, the Center for Domestic Preparedness, and the Emergency Management Institute. Monte holds a master's degree in St. Cloud State University in Public Safety Executive Leadership and has completed the FBI's LEEDA Leadership Program. Fire Chief John Cunningham has over 23 years of experience in public safety field and serves as the Fire Chief and Emergency Management Director for the City of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Brooklyn Park is a vibrant and very diverse community with 81,000 residents. The department handles more than 8,200 calls for service annually. He is also the president of the Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association. Chief Cunningham has a bachelor's degree in business management from Fairfield University and a master's degree in Homeland Security Leadership from the University of Connecticut.
Welcome, everybody. I have a really special episode tonight. In fact, it's a first of a kind for Situational Awareness Matters. I have with me the Fire Chief of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, John Cunningham, and I have Monte Fronk, who's going to share with us a story of tragedy and perhaps celebration of the life of his daughter, who was murdered in an incident here in Brooklyn Park. And we want to pay our tributes to her, and Monte agreed to sit and chat with us about the incident and how it was, what that experience was like, and then about her spiritual journey. And I learned some things along the way about that, and I thought it was fascinating enough to dedicate an episode to it. So, welcome both of you to the show. I'm glad to have you. I appreciate the time you're gifting to me today. Monte, let's start by having you talk about your daughter from when she was a child, and bring us up to current day.
Well, Rich, before you even start, I always want to do, anytime I'm asked, is to do our traditional Ojibwe welcome to who we are. And that is, we say, Bozu, Awan, Inni the Gods, Monte Fronk, Indigo, Mille Band, and Jujaba, Sheminising and Da, Iwadi Dash, Tribal Emergency Management, Firefighter, and EMT, and Mapwaduduum. What that says is, hello, my name is Awan, that's my traditional Ojibwe name. It means the fog. I work for the Mille Band of Ojibwe, which is one of the 11 sovereign nations in Minnesota. I live in District 2A called Sheminising. I work for the Mille Band as a tribal emergency manager, firefighter, and EMT, and I belong to the clan of Bear, and that's called Mukwa with that one. So with my daughter, she is, with your story here, she had a very unique life growing up. At a very young age, she was diagnosed as we would call a second generational fetal alcohol child, which means that her biological mother had used alcohol during her pregnancy, which caused just enough damage to her frontal lobe that these children will never have impulse control. They appear very normal on the outside, but unfortunately with no impulse control, that can lead them into very dark and dangerous situations. We also realized that she also had a second issue, which was called reactive attachment disorder, which she wouldn't want to attach to us as her adoptive parents. And as she grew in age, this two things started to play out in our home and cause a really issue with our safety. She would do things to get attention to herself. For example, she would try to hang herself for getting the attention in our home. Luckily, the Mille Band at that time was providing just amazing training in this exact area. A trainer named Cheryl Whitehawk came in and provided just amazing training, and when I brought my daughter's behaviors up to her, she said this is following that exact track of a second generation of fetal alcohol, and we got her properly tested and diagnosed with that. But as she started to get about 11 years old, the safety of our home was challenged with her behaviors in there. It got to the point where she would come at us with knives and other weapons and scissors, especially when she wouldn't get her way, and she would revert to a much younger age. Her mother and I had to make a very hard decision, and that was we had to look at out-of-home placement for her, because the safety in her home was there. I mean, the ambulance from the local ambulance was there at home many times.
About what age we're talking about?
We're talking probably about 10 years old.
Okay.
And we started seeing it starting to flare up with that one.
Okay.
And about 11 and a half or so, we had to look at the out-of-home placement for her. Very gut-wrenching decision as parents. But the safety of ourselves and of her sister, Lenicia, was of great concern. The challenge came that Cheryl Whitehawk really let us know that there is really no out-of-home placement facilities for these second-generational fetal alcohol children. They don't need a locked unit. They don't need like a in-house therapy. What they need is like a group home with a little bit of structure to keep them on a good path and some guidance. But there was nothing in Minnesota at that time. So she was placed at different facilities that were mostly like behavioral health type facilities that really did not benefit her at all. And what she would start to do is rebel at those facilities and typically go on run. Probably 4 to 5 different facilities that she went to, from northern Minnesota to southern Minnesota. And when she would run, she knew she had biological family here in the Twin Cities area. And that's what typically she would go and run to and try to find the ones she remembered in the cities here. And when that happened, the resources of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was amazing to work with. But more than anything, the Patty Weddling Fund, Patty herself, was just an amazing resource that I would reach out to, and we would get her picture everywhere through the National Center and also through Patty's resources with her center. But also, Rich, our brothers and sisters in fire, EMS, and other public safety, we're a family. And when I called Metro Fire and EMS and law enforcement agencies, they were like, Monte, give us your picture. If we're out on a call, especially with EMS and fire, if we were on a call or in the back of an ambulance, we'll keep an eye out because we know where we see this age young people at and where they may run to. So not only was the National Center involved, Patty, but all of our brothers and sisterhoods of fire and EMS were there just keeping an eye out. Most times because of that, we were able to find her, bring her back to another facility, and hopefully she would do well. It came to a facility in the St. Cloud area that she then ran from, got on the North Star line, and actually made it down to the metro area and basically found family and was basically hit out. Many agencies were keeping an eye out for her. And then we would hear bits and pieces with that one. But then soon there was at that time a human trafficking task force. We had one investigator in St. Paul and one in Minneapolis. This one, she was about 14 years old now in her life. And with her lack of impulse control, these were the exact type of young women that were just prone to human trafficking. And all of a sudden, we started seeing postings of her on adult media, back pages, things like that for services rendered, for services. And the people who do this are very sophisticated, where you cannot easily find where they're coming from or where she's at. And from her age of 14 to 16, she was being human trafficked at that time. We would see her postings again on adult social media sites for services, but because of the sophistication, they couldn't find where she was at or where she was being human trafficked from with that one. So we knew she was alive, and knew she was unfortunately being human trafficked. Could not locate where she could be. And with that, it's the worst thing to think about what could be happening to her being human trafficked. There was not the established type of task forces we have now across not only Minnesota, but nationwide at that time. But again, the National Center was right there for me. Patty Weddling was calling me routinely, asking how we were doing. My brothers and sisters in fire and EMS were trying to keep their eye out if they had maybe a call and it might be a patient of theirs. Just after her 16th birthday, everything went silent on those adult websites. and no more advertising for her, no more photographs of her, no more, whatever call this number is, or, the website you go to. And it was about 6 months and no trace, no word. And had, as a father, the worst feeling you could ever think of. At that time, Columbia Heights Police Department, unfortunately, they had found a young person in a trunk in a vehicle that had impounded, who, by description, was a young woman. And, of course, my mind went right there. I knew the I knew the Columbia Heights Fire Department. I gave them a call, and I said, here's my daughter's photo. If this might be her.
That's good. Just hold on a second.
Sorry, there's no mute button.
No.
It's all right.
No. It's a long one.
Cardiac arrest.
Oh.
First Park Engine 1, Car 1, Engine 4, for medical, 7749 Gerard Avenue North. Return call, 56-year-old male, that fainted, not breathing, press 337 way, 79,000.
That's a pretty unique paging system.
They're trying to upgrade it, so.
Well, we need that much tones, for, and you know what the call is compared to our.
I got it on my
phone
first.
Oh wow.
How long for the reset on the?
Usually about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Should. Till the red light goes out.
All right. I'm afraid to have you start back up.
That's
and
fine.
then they're going to talk,
Yeah.
and you can stop.
That's
start.
fine.
It only goes off when the car goes out, so hopefully Maurer will get a chance to sleep tonight.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and pick it
Oh,
up.
I didn't know if it will be the full tone again or not. So
No, you shouldn't hear a tone. You might hear a little voice, but that should
Oh,
just be
okay.
it. So
because this is your
they go on route silent, so
okay. So as I was saying, then at that time, Columbia Heights had found a young woman in a trunk they did not know about, and I had provided a photo of my daughter saying she's missing, she's no trace of her, and here's her photo. And I just said, if this is her, I will come down and identify. Luckily, it was not her. But I did ask Patty Wetterling this very, honest question. And I said, Patty, when a young woman is possible, we knew she was being human trafficked, and all of a sudden things go blank, where all the previous social media that she was advertised on, there's nothing. What's the outcome? What should my situational awareness should be preparing for? And Patty was very honest about that. And she said, Monty, you better start thinking of a funeral. And honestly, Monty, she may be or she may never be found. Because that's typically what happens with human trafficking victims, is they're never found. So in my mind, as any father would be, you're waiting for the call and waiting to see if anything would happen. A short time period after that, the investigator from St. Paul, who does human trafficking at that time, called and said, Monty, we may have a lead on your daughter. We don't know, but there was a flower shop in St. Paul that had a security camera, and a young woman came in, purchased some flowers, and left, but the owner happened to have my daughter's National Missing Children's poster in the shop, and something clicked, and she called 911 to get over there. The security system wasn't very high quality, and so the photo was grainy. But the one thing the shop owner had was an address. So St. Paul went over to this residence, and it was a non-English speaking home, and opened the door, and a young woman was there. They showed my daughter's photo to her, and they could tell the body language just changed. And they were pretty blunt about, we're going to check this house out, or it's going to get kind of messy pretty shortly here. And so they did what they do well. They weapons out. They did a felony search of the house. Situational awarenesses, keep themselves safe. They cleared the first floor out. Nothing found. They went downstairs and were clearing out the downstairs, and they just happened to look in kind of a sitting gaming room, but there's a couch there. And the officer just happened to look to his left, and he saw a pair of shoes that were heel to toe on the ground vertical. And shoes don't do that. And so being a good officer, officer safety number 1, weapon drawn, move the couch out of the way, show me your hands, show me your hands. The young person was on their stomach, so he couldn't tell. They got the person handcuffed and got her up, and sure enough, it was my daughter.
Oh, wow.
And she was alive. She would not say anything. What happened? They got her over there, and they called me up and said, we recovered her. She's alive. She's not saying anything, which is very typical of a human trafficking victim with that. And she wouldn't say anything. We then found a group home up in Bemidji, which is run by North Homes, which is for older teen girls just looking to go on to the next part of life. And she was attending their ALC school, and the school resource officer just happened to be there, and whatever was happening inside of her, she just needed to finally talk and tell what happened. And luckily, the investigator for that jurisdiction was properly trained at Corner House in Minnesota, and Bemidji has a sexual assault interview center called Hope House, which is warm, it's inviting, it's safe. It's not like a typical interrogation type room that she's normally used to. And he was trained the right way. And once she opened the gates of what happened, it wasn't a couple hours. This was a 12-hour interview. She went 8 hours almost one day and 4 hours the next day, explaining everything that happened in very, very grave detail. What happened when she was being human trafficked. And I got that report. And that is something you never want to ever read, of a very graphic nature of what can be done to a young woman's body, and especially when it's your own daughter with that. But with Nada, she is a very strong. Her Ojibwe name means she's a fierce, passionate woman. And she just kind of was very resilient. She did not finish high school there, but came down to Brooklyn Park here. Actually went to the local college here, had a unique program for older teen to about 25 who did not finish high school, and they can get a high school diploma. And she did that on her own. All the trauma that she had survived being human trafficked, she still had the resilience to go on her own and get her high school diploma done. She worked several customer service positions, and then actually on her own found a very good position with a company in another suburb here. For being 21 years old and having a high school diploma, she ended up with a livable wage job with a full benefit package. And as a father, that's very proud with that. She had, in that early part of her life, in her early 20s, several relationships in her life, but the fetal alcohol is a very tough thing with the reactive attachment. They don't want to attach to somebody, and really are very difficult. At the age of, even at 20 years old, on her 20th birthday, she wanted to have dinner with me, and so I came down to here, went to Maple Grove, had a very nice dinner, and that was probably the first really time that we really talked with father and daughter, and talk life, and talk about her experiences. And the one thing she said, which I will never forget, is in a moment where we're kind of having a good heart to heart, and she said, "You know, Dad, the only reason I'm alive is because of you. Because everything I did for you to give up on me, you didn't. And because of your brothers and sisters in fire and EMS, they always kept an eye out, and they always were looking for me. And everything I did to have you go opposite and to let me go, you never did. And that was a story I'll never forget in her life. And she was doing well, working at the position. And then on May 26th, my life changed forever.
Yeah. Well, just the first part of this has just been absolutely gut-wrenching. I commend your strength to be able to share this and how valuable this will be for people. So I want to come up to March 26th. And,
May 26th.
I'm sorry, May 26th. I'm looking at it right here on the piece of paper. I don't know why I said March. May 26th. And John, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what happened that day from the perspective of the fire and EMS response, and then we'll kind of talk about the aftermath of it. But so, what was the initial dispatch that you were responding to that day?
Sure, and Monty, thanks for sharing that. It's, as a chief, we oftentimes never hear the whole story that leads up to an event that we're called to. So just what a powerful moment, and thanks for sharing that. And May 26th, I was driving into work. I live about 25-30 minutes outside the city, and one of the first things I do is I just check the CAD calls and see what's coming in, what have we done the night before. But I noticed that there was this standby request for fire, and started reading the CAD notes and noticed that we were being dispatched to assist police on an unknown incident that was reported, shots fired in an apartment building, and they weren't sure where it originated from. They had a caller that indicated that there was rounds that were fired that went through a floor, and they were trying to figure out where these shots ultimately were coming from. So, as with any event such as that, you don't know what you're going into, and police activated everything that they do from a tactical standpoint and trying to set up perimeters and figure out what exactly they were doing, what they were dealing with. Evacuated the structure, and this is happening in real time as I'm driving in. Our battalion chief, as well as an engine company, got dispatched to stage an area, which in any of these types of calls is pretty standard. You get dispatched, while law enforcement tries to figure out what's happening. I ended up coming into the office right at the time that the request was coming in for our mobile command post. So our battalion chief was there. Wasn't a lot of radio traffic. We touched base with him. They were good. We had to change some of our response procedures because we're a pretty lean operation. So we have 3 engine companies that are working each day, and then a battalion chief. So we're starting to backfill at least the command side. But I'm like, look, I'll take the command post down there. One of our firefighters hopped in that. One of the other deputy chiefs hopped in his vehicle, and I drove down as well to start getting set up. And it's one of those things as a fire chief. You're going into fires. You kind of know what to expect when you when you get there. But when you're dealing with a tactical operation, it looks completely different, right? I mean, you have law enforcement officers with long guns, a mobile incident command post that was somewhat established, but obviously with a request for a mobile command post, things were escalating, pretty quick, and that's always kind of our side. We want to establish this unified command, and that's one thing in Brooklyn Park with police and fire. At least since I've been here for the last 3 years now, is a really strong working relationship with our police department. That we get called to their events to help staff mobile command post or set up incident command or unified command, and they come and back us up as well. So we get there, but it's one of those scenes that you're all of a sudden find yourself in the middle of, where you have law enforcement taking up perimeters, and their investigators and their negotiators are getting set up, but they weren't able to make any contact with the parties inside. They were able to determine where they think that these rounds were ultimately coming from. But the building gets evacuated, and then they're honing in on this one area.
John, let me pause for a second. Do you have tactical medics that embed with the police on an incident like this?
Yeah, so on our SWAT, the police department SWAT team, we do have one of our part-time firefighters that is embedded with that team. So if he's available, he'll go as part of the SWAT team contingent. So I'm not sure if he was there that morning. I believe he was.
Okay.
But we're always in that kind of the backdrop, the support with the ambulance that's staging by. So. And just as a side note, with everything that's happened, in the past year and a half, we took kind of a very proactive stance on making sure that all of our firefighters had the right PPE. So every single day they're actually wearing ballistic jackets. They're very lightweight. It's just part of their casual everyday wear that, just we want to keep them out of any trouble, but we also know that things can quickly escalate. So we're just even our own day-to-day operations, we're constantly reevaluating how do we keep our people safe, what does their PPE look like, and then what does their training look like. But on this, we get our command post set up, and the detectives in there, we're just getting debriefed on what's happening, and literally just start to get things set up, all of our equipment deployed, and working with PD and getting them all situated and trying to transition them over, and got our cameras set up, and we're just informed literally within a matter of minutes that they're able to use some of their technology and actually get some eyes into this apartment and located, unfortunately, 2 deceased individuals in that unit. As you can imagine, that changes the game. They cleared what they had to do, and then from a fire and EMS standpoint, there was unfortunately nothing more that we could do. So we ultimately pack up and head home that day. And I think it was probably about 24 hours later or so. I remember I get a text message, and it wasn't from Monte, but it was from a colleague of mine that just says, "Hey, just as a heads up, I'm hearing that this is Monte's daughter that was involved in your incident," not knowing the full details, and my heart sank. I just you go on these calls, even though it's so upsetting when you wish you could do something, and you just weren't able to, and then you compound that with the fact that someone that and Monte and I think go back
over 20 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time, right?
Yeah.
So since I moved out, in Minnesota, him and I remember working, I think, at the memorial, together, and I see Monte, and he's one of the probably the only people I know that you have that iconic hat that I just always see, in your Class A uniform. Just a big smile, and always willing to step up to help, and not knowing the backstory, and even learning, more tonight is, just so powerful. But you go on these calls, you don't know what the circumstance was, and talking to the deputy chief the other day, the case is still open until they can rule out some ballistics and whatnot, but. Based upon everything that we know and the circumstances and the murder suicide that happened, which is the most probable, and it's just my heart just aches for you. And now hearing the backstory on her life, on what happened to that morning, driving into work, not knowing what you're going into, and then ultimately finding out that it's a really good friend of yours and their daughter that was part of such a violent act, that not only that day but just the history of that. And my heart aches for you, and I think you said it earlier, that the fire, EMS, and public safety family is just so tight, and the days that and the weeks that followed after that, and you and I touching base, trying to connect you to resources, and the community outpouring of community support that you're able to get to help kind of clear out the apartment, and what I thought was just so powerful about everything that was going on for you and your life and your family, one of the things, and I won't forget it, but it's so just who you are as a person. I think you're the Ojibwe culture of giving back to the community. It was, she had all these assets and things that we want to give it back and pass that on to someone out in the community. I mean, you took my breath away when you said that. I'm like, I got nothing. I can't offer anything more than what you just did to help someone else that's in need. So, truly from a fire EMS standpoint, our thoughts and prayers go out to you, and just to learn, her story and what happened, and it's so powerful.
Monty, how were you notified that it was your daughter?
It happened later in that day. We just happened.
Was that the day after?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's about the day after, and we actually had a fire up in our tribal community of abandoned house. So I was one of the first on scene, like we do, 360, and Garrison Fire was coming down. So I gave them the report of, smoke conditions, what ABCD side was coming from on here, where the hydrant was, and so my day was 3 hours later than it normally is. The fire, we got everything put away. The fire taken care of with that. Luckily, nobody hurt. And then finally coming home much later than normal, and Nada's mother just started calling me, and I'm like, I'm tired. I just don't want to talk right now. So I want to get home and maybe to get in the shower, like we do after any incident. And but then my other daughter, Anissa, texted me, said, "Dad, call home emergency." And when I finally called Anita's mother, Jen, she was crying, and I knew. And unfortunately, in our world, we know at Fire and EMS, we know that voice. We know, and I just said, "Nita's dead, isn't she?" And he said yes. And it just, and the our little small police department in Isle had to give the notification, and I give that officer a lot of credit, because I think that was his first death notification, and to a public safety member of the family to that one. And so rushed to her mother's apartment, and just comforted her, even though we have not been together in a number of years, and my daughter Lenicia. Dennis making the calls, and I'll tell you, Rich and John, calling the grandparents, calling her elders was the worst call, because you have to get them out of bed, because they're in their 80s, and trying to explain to them that their granddaughter is murdered, and they're just like, what? And there's no easy way to say this, except, as we know in close human speak, is Nada is murdered, and we don't know much what's going on, because it's 11:30 at night. That was the hardest call. Then my next call was to Greg Hayes with Minnewacan Fire. I had to let our brother and sisterhood know that this has happened, and there are certain things which I need to have done for her spiritual journey. And Greg is a member of another tribal nation, and just a good instant commander, and I've been to many of his trainings. And I just called him up, and I let him know, and he was just devastated. And I said, Greg, you got to do a couple of things for me. Well, 3 things, Greg. You've got to let our brothers and sisters know this, whether it goes to the Fire Chiefs Association, our Emergency Management Association, but you got to let everybody know. 2, I need to notify all 6 Northern Tribal Emergency Managers. I need them to be the pallbearers, because in our Ojibwe process, the pallbearers had to be 6 male Native pallbearers. And 3rd, I need you to tell them we got to bring food for the wake and the funeral. And Greg's like, I'm on it. Monty, focus on your family. And if I had to do all that, I would have been a total basket case. But Greg just took it off and said, I'll keep you informed. Be there for your family. And so that was just like such. But that's what our brother and sisterhood does for each other. we always talk about that, but now I need them. And things were happening, and I knew I was in good hands with Greg from Minnewacan. And then it was just getting through that night, calling up all my sisters and all the aunties and uncles and letting them know this happened. And so many tears and so many just disbelief. And but like I say, but calling my parents up and letting them know it was the worst call I ever had, because there's no easy way to tell them that their granddaughter is dead. So once we got to the first night, needless like there was no sleep. I mean, you just and what happened, I didn't know. Next day, I called the investigator with Brooklyn Park, and he just asked me. He said, "Well, did you know she was seeing this gentleman?" I'm like, "I didn't even know she was even seeing anybody." That was the first question. And the second question, he said, "Well, did you know there's an AR-15 223 caliber rifle in the apartment?" I'm like, "No," and that was a murder weapon that killed her. And that's why your shots fired call, because as we know, with a 223 rifle, the rounds go through many apartments. And so I said no, and so then began our process for getting what we call on her spiritual journey, which is a 4-day process.
Yeah. So Nada was native Ojibwe.
Yep.
And it means there are certain things that need to be done for her spiritual journey. And I learned a lot from you, just from being a distant observer of all this. But can you share for our listeners and viewers who are not Native American what it means to have this spiritual journey and what the process is about?
Well, you have to remember, Rich, in the United States there are 580 federally recognized tribes, and everyone does things a little bit different when a loved one passes. For our Ojibwe community, especially at Mille, we really do the traditional process of the 4-day. And John, we'll talk about that in a little bit, saw this 6 years prior in another incident we'll talk about. But in that 4-day, certain things have to happen. And this is where I look back, and as we call them our Manadukes or our spirits in Ojibwe society, and everything happened for the right reasons for my daughter's spiritual journey. When she's returned back from the medical examiner's office, we have to then wash her body with cedar and water to start the first process. And that's something that her mother Jen really wanted to do. The spiritual leader had came in the next day to my house and just guided us what we need to do for her. A lot of it I already knew, but for her mother, was giving what we have to do, preparing for her. So when she was brought back up, we had to wash her, and at the same time, we have to start what's called a spiritual fire for her. We have to get a fire going that runs 24/7 for 4 days. It was in my backyard to let the spirit world know that there is somebody on beginning their journey with that one. So the first thing we had to wash the body, and Jen and Nada's mother got to do that, what she really wanted to do. The funeral home advised us, she does have bullet wounds, and I hate to say it, but seen it before, as what I've seen. Luckily, because of the short distance when he fired the rifle, typically that round tumbles and makes a big hole coming out. But it was such close range, it was pretty much through and through. So it was what appeared to be, was most of that type of rifle rises as you fire it if you're untrained how to properly hold it. And the first round looks like went through her side, out, down. Second round was a hard shot, and a third round right through her shoulder. And she was pretty much dead instantly from what, so far I can tell. The report will tell us more when I get that from the investigation. And so the wounds were just 3/4 inch in, 3/4 inch out. So, but that was very minor. So we were prepared for that. We got to wash her with that one, and then on the third night comes the wake, and this is where Greg and all my brothers and sisters in the fire and EMS came in because to bring the food, because we have to feed everybody at the wake, and we have to feed everybody at the funeral afterwards. And and Greg was like, "I got this covered, Monty. Just focus on your daughter." And so it was just a big burden off my shoulders, and that's what our brother and sisterhood really does for each other. When something like this happens, we always say we're going to be there, but in my case, this really came to being. And the wake happened, and I couldn't believe who showed up, and the food and everything that was needed to her to get her on her journey was done. Everything is done in Ojibwe, in our Ojibwe language, and everybody who was there saw this and heard all of it done. Granted, did not understand what was going on because it was all in our Ojibwe language. Once it was done and we eat with her, with that one, the spiritual leader, her name was Babata Boyd, then just brought a chair out and sat down, and then she's just elegant in her storytelling ability, and she just told the entire story of our process in English and where it came from, hundreds of years ago, why we do this for, why we had to eat with her, and where she'll be going on the funeral and her journey with this. And so all the responders who came in uniform and all that were just, at the end, there just you could have heard a pin drop, because she is such an elegant storyteller and spiritual leader that it all, when they heard the reason why, and they just said, it's a beautiful story, Monty. This is an amazing gift in travel that she's going to be on. And we were a little concerned because it was all in Ojibwe, and we were like, are we going to understand what this means? But she did. That's the way she did a beautiful job telling the story of that. Many people afterwards came up to me and hugs. I mean, so many tears shed, and three things happened. Number one, all my brothers and sisters, not only my own family, who came in uniform from all the different services, got to grieve with me for a child who was murdered. Two, they got to see or experience a traditional Anishinaabe or Ojibwe funeral, because with the 7 northern tribal nations, this could happen to another person, another family member, or a fire department would be supporting this, and now they knew what their role could be. Third is they brought the food to feed everybody, and that's a greatest gift that they did, and because that's part of our tradition, we had to feed everybody there. Between the wake and the funeral, typically somebody might stay with Neda, and in this case, her sister, my other daughter, Alicia, that was what she wanted to do for herself. She needed to be there with her sister, and I couldn't think of a better opportunity or gift that she could do. So she stayed with Neda in our up in our center that was up in, we call it our District 2 community, or Minnesanakwang, which means people of the swamp in our Ojibwe language. But that was the right place to have it. And so Nisi stayed with her sister all night long, which was what she needed to do for her gift. And the next day was the funeral. Again, all the responders who came brought the food, and on that fourth day, there is, the story says that she is going to a place, we call it the place of everlasting happiness. When they cross over in this journey, where they're going to is a happy place. There's no pain, there's no suffering, all the traumas that Neda experienced, all that are all washed away. She'll be happy. She'll meet relatives from 10,000 years there, and the thing that we have to start doing is letting her go. And what we do as a Ojibwe person is, a week after the funeral, we have one more feast for her, and then our stories tell us that we have to let them go. If we continue to grieve as Ojibwe people, she will know that. That's what the stories tell us, and she won't be happy. She won't want to stay there, so we have to let them go. And it's very hard to do that. But when I look back, and everything that happened was everybody got what they needed to do for Nada. Her mother did, her sister did. My piece was to look out and see all my brothers and sisters in the fire and EMS service be there for me and see this wonderful journey, because in my mind this will happen in another tribal community sometime, and if this could help provide an opportunity to learn. So if there can help another Native family grieving, they know what to do in their jurisdiction with that. What I needed to do for myself was I needed to come down to her apartment here in Brooklyn Park and see where she died and clean it out. What we do as Ojibwe people is we have to give everything away of the deceased, but that's part of what we have to do. John was willing to send a couple of crews over to help me, which just touched me and honored. But I had actually a high school classmate who does a business like this and came over and just was grateful and compassionate, and we were able to clean everything out in an hour and a half, which I thought it would take me like 6 hours to do this.
Thank you to Monte Fronk and Fire Chief John Cunningham for sharing your story with us today. Remember, this is part one of a two-part show, so be sure to check back next week for the conclusion and advice from Monte and John. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present my programs on a virtual platform to groups ranging in size from 6 to 400, with recorded playbacks being viewed over 29,000 times. Here's hoping the new COVID variants don't shut things down again, and we get a chance to return to some form of normalcy, whatever that's going to look like. I'd like to thank the organizations that have hosted live situational awareness programs since the last episode aired. That would be the Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education, the Fire Chiefs Association of British Columbia, Clark County Fire Protection District Number 6 in Vancouver, Washington, the Spring Fire Department in Spring, Texas, Fire Rescue International in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. A special thanks to the organizations who've allowed me to offer your members virtual training. If you're interested in hosting a live event or a virtual program, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the SAMatters.com homepage, and I'll give you a call. Finally, remember to check out the show notes on how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 376 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to our guests for sharing their difficult story of tragedy. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gassaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.